Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. Can everybody hear me well? Perfect. All right. Well, we really appreciate everybody joining us today. I'll just do a bit of introduction and then turn it over to our panelist here. So my name is Adriana Bankston. I'm currently a congressional fellow in the House of Representatives, working on research funding, science education, and other topics that we can touch on today. I wear multiple hats. I'm also membership engagement chair for AAAS Section X, which is organizing this event. We'll talk about that a bit. And also leading a policy research biomedical workforce group through the Sai Resident Collective. We are a team of folks doing research and thinking through how to improve the scientific endeavor through the Civic Science Media Lab, a nonprofit from the US. So our goal through the group is to cultivate a robust STEM workforce through innovative and equitable research studies and training programs. We are focused on both traditional and non-traditional STEM pathways and operate generally at the intersection of research, higher education, and workforce development. And I can share a link to the group for those who are interested. Just 1 second. There we go. All right. So today we'll be talking about some of the work that we've conducted through the group, as well as in collaboration with Science for Good. So I'll share that as well. Sorry, I have this. Okay. All right, if you're interested in that. So today we want to talk a little bit about the current landscape and what early career scientists are experiencing. It's no surprise we're in an unusual time for science, and we wanted to use this hour to highlight issues, but also things that we're hoping for will come out of this unusual time to support science. Obviously, the Trump administration's actions have placed especially young scientists in precarious positions in terms of their research projects and careers. And our contribution through the SAI group has been to conduct essentially a short 2-week survey through our networks to see what we could get as far as opinions from trainees. We published a blog post, which will be out. I'll share it now, but I'm not sure if everyone can access. But we wanted to get a bit of idea of opinions from folks that have experienced these issues, and then highlight some of the quotes from them, get a few opinions out, and we'll also have another research project ongoing that will be published later on with more data. So you can read the blog post for some of the background here today. It highlights a bit of the landscape here and some of the things we'll be discussing. And really want you all to hear from the group members here, and all of them are really leaders in the field and have spearheaded a number of things to try to contribute to combating the current state of science and in their own space. So I want to introduce our speakers today. So first we have Crystal Hammond, who is a policy researcher and also UC Riverside graduate, who's exploring how public policy, equity, and advocacy influence access and outcomes for underrepresented students. We have JP Flores, who is a PhD candidate at USC Chapel Hill in bioinformatics and computational biology, and Sierra Rauser, who is a postdoc in the Department of Neuroscience and Experimental Therapeutics at Texas A&M, and wanted to highlight a bit of their journeys and obviously different career stages as well, and so they'll have a lot to tell us today. So I'm going to start by sort of laying the groundwork of why we're doing this event. Why do we care about why early career researchers need to speak up? And I'll kind of go in order based on career stages, because you guys are at different stages right now. So Crystal, you want to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks all for coming here. So I believe that early career voices really need to be highlighted right now because essentially we are being asked to build a future with little to no support. And that can lead to future instability of the workforce, the future workforce. It also leads to more gaps in opportunity and in access. Um, and it also leads to more of wider gap into research training.
Yeah, that's a good framing. And then follow this up with JP, who's currently in grad school. What are your thoughts?
Already in grad school. Yeah. Thank you for organizing this, Adriana. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm now going into my fifth year into my PhD. And as someone who is nearing the end and looking to defend, I can say that, early career researchers often sit at this weird intersection of innovation, right? We're a huge part of the scientific workforce, but also instability, right? We're doing high impact work, right? We do a lot of basic science. We're building tools that really power translational research, but we're also the most precariously funded, right? So when we're in a situation like we are right now, when funding is cut or threatened, it's not just the work that our labs do that pause, right? It's our careers. If you're an international student, right, we see that visas are being jeopardized, and quite honestly, like passions burn out. Here at UNC, I'm mentoring a lot of students that are asking, should I stay in science? Right? So without making space for early career voices, we kind of risk missing the warning signs of a fractured pipeline, right? Referring to the STEM pipeline. And we need to be part of shaping that future that we're inheriting. Um, I also want to say that, highlighting early career voices is important because there's also scientists from underrepresented backgrounds, right? So in a lot of different professions, you can't really be what you can't see, right? I'm a big believer that representation matters. So we should really make early career voices heard, especially from scientists with these underrepresented backgrounds. We want the diversity of our workforce to reflect that of the country, and we need to make sure that these voices are represented, because these voices and perspectives will come with interesting questions that will make societal impact.
Yeah, definitely. And then want to turn to Sierra now to tell us, obviously you're in a different stage. Tell us what your thoughts are as far as the future of the field and your voices.
Well, I'll echo what Crystal and JP have said in terms of this uncertainty. So, speaking from the perspective of a postdoctoral researcher, we are in a stage where funding often determines where we end up next. Specifically, we are disproportionately affected by federal funding cuts because we heavily rely on grant supporting positions. There's a lot of competition for limited opportunities, and we often lack the institutional safety nets that are offered to more senior investigators. So we're currently expected to become the next generation of independent scientists and leaders in science, but the steps that we've been told are going to help us to get there. So acquiring funding, having mentored transitions and early stage career supports are no longer reliable. And so why I think our voices are really important right now is that we do not have a stable foundation to move forward, either in our research or in our careers, even as some of us are being told to keep calm and carry on as usual.
Yeah, thank you all for that framing. And I want to turn a bit to your own stories, because that's one of the goals I have here today, is for people to hear from you and where you are currently and how you're experiencing this. Going to kind of where you are right now, what have been really some of the most harmful impacts of the administration on your careers and, your thoughts on scientific careers? Maybe we'll start with JP, in terms of grad school impacts.
Sure. Yeah. I think this question is very multifaceted, right? I'm a scientist that really cares about bridging science and society. And for me, a big goal of my PhD, honestly, is to try and contribute to mentoring the next generation of scientists. So here at UNC, we had the NIH pipeline program. Oh my gosh, what is it called? PrEP, right? So our lab gets a postdoc scholar every year. They're usually from a underrepresented background, and we give them the tools so that they are successful for graduate school, right? So yes, we are that program previously tried to fill in gaps in skills, but it's also, again, trying to diversify the scientific workforce so that their beautiful minds can help contribute to asking questions we need answered. The student that was in our lab a year ago is Cuban, right? And for example, she sat behind me and turned around one day and was like, JP, I'm applying for graduate schools. I feel pretty good, right? Skill-wise, I feel like I'm ready to do this, but do you know of any Cuban scientists that can help me, navigate my way through science with this perspective? And I think this is a case in which we are truly feeling those negative impacts, right? Like I said earlier, you can't really be what you can't see. This is a student in the next generation talking about how, they would love to see more diversity in the scientific workforce so that, they have those role models, right? For myself, I'm at the end of my PhD going in the job market, and I want to pivot into studying rare diseases. The rare disease field is already understudied, underfunded, and I know a lot of rare disease patients whose studies were stopped because this was in the purview of different equity and inclusion grants, right? So in terms of the harmful impacts of this administration's actions, they're everywhere. As someone who just wants to make an impact with their science and wants to bridge science and society, I feel like I'm feeling these impacts everywhere with everything I'm trying to do. I shouldn't laugh, but like if I'm not not crying, I guess I got to be laughing,
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. And so turning to Crystal now, because I know you're thinking about going into graduate school. So tell us a little bit about, how do you see your future in science?
My future in science looks like a lot more, I guess, getting deeper into the more qualitative side of research. So hearing more stories about how people have been impacted. For example, even in my research regarding the funding, the federal science cuts, right? I believe Nature magazine posted a poll earlier this year, and I think 70% of the respondents stated that they are going to be leaving the United States, which was pretty inevitable. But they're looking at studying in Europe and in Canada. So it's sort of like well, not we, but this administration is sort of leaning in the direction of brain gain towards other countries. And then we're losing, a lot of researchers on our end. And then there's also nonprofit limitations. So a lot of students have tried to lean more on community organizations and nonprofits, trying to just make sense of how they can help and how the nonprofits can at least assist in that process. But then these same organizations are also under strain. There's a lot of different research grants that have also been stopped from these organizations, unfortunately. So when that funding disappears, it creates more instability, right? And then thirdly, I noticed a lot of students have been crowdfunding. So they're making their own GoFundMe campaigns. And this, I'm not surprised at all. When you're really passionate about the work that you do and you've put in so much, I guess you could say, blood, sweat, and tears into your work, you really want to see it come to fruition. So those are just three patterns that I've noticed this far. And as far as my graduate journey, I'm looking into going into policy and law. So I do want to focus on like international health law and immigration policy has been another interest of mine.
Yeah, that's good to know how you're looking to use your background. Certainly policy is a field and also something that people are maybe going less into also because of funding issues, but it's another topic. And then Sierra, as far as your career, I know you're looking into going to a faculty role. What do you think about administration impacts on your career?
Sure. Well, even before thinking about the transition into faculty, I think for postdocs and even senior graduate students, I think all the uncertainty that's come about as a result of funding limitations has made me restructure how I approach my research. So I've had to scale it back. I'm considering using smaller sample sizes for some of my ongoing experiments, narrowing down my research questions, and not following the data as we would ideally do, but because I just need to be ready in case everything comes to a halt. And so now my inclination to really build these long-term layered studies is put to a halt because I'm focusing on the work that I can do now, and making it as meaningful and as publishable as possible, especially because our publications are sort of our last line of what can't be taken away from us right now. And those are things that help us transition into academic and non-academic positions, are those sort of tangibles. But it's true that it has also affected my career trajectory. So I do have a hope of going into a faculty position, and I'm readjusting my timeline for entering the job market because I wanted to hit certain milestones to be more competitive as an applicant, but also to feel like I was ready. I want to develop my skills as a teacher and a mentor, and I want to gain more professional development on top of, building up my CV. And so I really think that the changes that are happening right now are going to be impacting the next generation of PIs a lot. And obviously, it's going to be changing our career trajectories and where we feel welcomed and where we feel valued, especially in the US.
Yeah, I appreciate all these personal perspectives. I guess I want to zoom out a little bit to talk about broader impacts. You sort of brought this up, but are there things you're hearing from your institution, other colleagues that you have? I want to kind of get a sense of what folks are experiencing. JPU sort of alluded to this, so maybe you can start us off. What can we sort of be doing to help more broadly, right? In the sense of what issues are you hearing from your institution and your colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of different things that range from, oh, I'm going to leave the United States to do a postdoc abroad, right? I'm hearing things like, my lifelong dream was to work for the USAID, and now now that's not no longer a viable option, right? However, I do think, although there's a lot of things that we are talking about now that are negatively impacting, I feel like we're just asking the wrong questions, right? So, like, for example, I want to become a scientist that really embraces the idea that science is for communities and society, right? I think a lot of us are thinking about this as, oh, we must weather the storm. And to do that, we need to talk to our representatives, right? We need to go abroad and do stuff. But I do think some of this energy should go to, well, how can we reimagine science in the future, right? So right now we're talking, people have traditionally talked about this publish and perish mode that we're operating under. And it's not necessarily conducive to impact for our neighbors, our families, et cetera. I just think we should think about that more, right? A lot of PIs or labs stop at wanting to publish their papers, right? I'm going to publish in Cell Nature Science, and that's it. On to the next project, right? But I do think we need to take an extra step after that and think about, okay, cool. I just published in Nature. How can I get these results and deliver them to the communities that I was trying to help out to begin with? Right. So although there's a lot of this gloom around, what we want to be doing, like going abroad, I do think there's a huge opportunity here to really think about how do we reimagine science so that, we can keep trust in science from the public and so that we can keep science rooted in community. Sorry to
No, that's really helpful.
a tiny bit.
Yes, no, I appreciate that. I think, yeah, same thing for Sierra's perspective here, because you are maybe thinking more broadly about the future of the field, right? So your own position, but also where do we see this going? And so happy to kind of take this the same route of what should we be asking that we're not, and what can we do if you want to address any positives as well?
Well, I think a lot of us have a difficult time seeing the positive in all of this. What I will say, though, is that many people on this call have probably been involved in the advocacy space longer than 2025. And certainly those of us on the panel have as well. I think that, at least in my experience being a first generation scientist, there's been a lot of question about the validity of speaking up about the importance of your science, about whether it's important for us to be communicating science to non-scientists. And if I can quote any one thing that I see as a good change coming from everything that's happened right now, it is that people are much more engaged in advocacy for science than I think has happened previously. And we're seeing it across all career stages. Although I'm a huge advocate for people starting as early as possible, it's never too early to understand the importance of your work and helping people to understand it, especially those who are most impacted by it, who may not be within academic circles. Something I also think about with respect to the broader impacts of this situation and something that I've seen at my own institution is that people are starting to delay plans of their life, not necessarily their research. So delaying things like moving or delaying starting families because of the funding uncertainties we're experiencing right now. And I know we didn't get to touch too much on that in our survey. We were very focused on our research, but I do think of that as a very important element of our lives, our work-life balance, and this idea that if we are trying to have a whole and fulfilled life, that changes in funding are absolutely going to be impacting those outside elements, which in turn obviously impact our mental health and well-being. And I could potentially see those who are talking about leaving the United States as seeing more viable stability outside of the United States doing science that allows them to have those external life factors that are important to them.
Yeah, and I appreciate you brought in advocacy as well, because we're sort of seeing already different ways that we can get involved in this, right? We'll get to that in a little bit. But thank you for both of those perspectives. And then Crystal, I know you're really interested in helping underrepresented students. Do you think there's still a space for them here? And what have you, how do we help them? But, what have you heard that's not working? What could we be doing for this group specifically? Because as JP said, you can't be what you can't see. So how do we remedy that?
I do think that it starts with the communication of what science means. So I believe that science communications could possibly do more of an explanation regarding the importance of it, the importance of representation. Not necessarily reiterating the quotas of how many people are involved in X and Y, but more so just highlighting more scientists, more chemical engineers, more just any sort of sector of science, showing them exactly who is in those positions, how they got there. And more importantly, I would also believe having more discussions like this with them in the room, inviting them to talk about their journeys from A to B, just to, I guess, garner and encourage more engagement, right? I do believe in hearing from the people that can inspire you because they do look like you. But I also do believe that the marketing of the language of what science means also helps people get in that room and get there.
Yeah, that helps a lot. And yeah, I think the idea of highlighting scientists from different backgrounds, different disciplines, all of these things can help. And certainly we're hoping that this is maybe the start of many of these conversations, and we're doing a bit of our part in this, facilitating some of this scientists being more visible and what's happening. So before we move on to the sort of mobilization part, I do want to address this question of why are scientists leaving and what can we do, because that is more and more in the news. Even before we started doing this work, I think it's been more obvious that this is happening. And so I kind of want to hear from you all, why do you think this is happening? And if there's any potential things we could be doing to stop this science brain drain, as we call it. I don't know who like this up. Maybe Crystal, you want to start because I think you brought this up before.
I can provide brief comment. I definitely believe that a lot of people are leaving because, when you tell someone or when you are showcasing, hey, we're going to cut access to this, it's saying it's basically kind of sending a signal to our brain saying, oh my gosh, what's next? What's the alternative? And I think the lack of transparencies in alternatives is why people are leaving. You're going to get discouraged if you don't see another way through. It signals, oh my gosh, it's going to be another hoop, another obstacle to kind of, navigate. So I would start with that. But if JP and Sierra want to jump in and maybe provide more context.
Yeah, JP, do you want to go ahead next?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, the US, I don't want to say used to, but the US used to be the destination for scientific training, right? But right now that promise kind of feels broken. I've mentioned this already, but I've talked with peers who are pursuing careers in Europe or Australia, right? Places with more stable research environments, guaranteed postdoc contracts, stronger social support systems. I know that my peers are getting ads on Instagram about the fellowships happening in France, right? But it's not just about money, right? It's also about feeling valued. Trainees want to work in systems that recognize our labor, into workforces that want to invest in our futures and aren't perpetually, right, like threatening to pull the rug out from under us. So I don't know. I feel like that is part of the reason why so many trainees are leaving. I mean, yes, there's this whole money component. Your life gets derailed, but it's also like, do we want to work in systems in which we don't feel valued, right? If I'm a diverse student who dedicates my career to figuring out why there are racial health disparities from a specific disease, like why would I want to stay in a workforce where it feels like it's not going to be talked about in a study section, right? Um, as far as what we can do about it, I don't know. I'm sure we'll talk about it during our mobilizing portion of this, but I think a lot of this has to do with stabilizing funding, right? There's visa restrictions right now that are happening that are preventing some of our brightest scientists from abroad from doing their work. We need to figure out how to keep this pipeline that we always talk about. We have to make sure this pipeline is still going. We got to make sure it's transparent, equitable, and we need to invest in things like mentorship and science communication, because these are the things that keep us engaged with both science and society.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Sarah, do you want to offer some thoughts here?
Sure. I'll add on to this that certainly within the United States, we're seeing widespread hiring freezes at universities and institutes. We're seeing delayed searches. Positions are disappearing that were once offered, and not because the departments don't need people, but because they just don't have the funding to support them. I know that many departments across the United States had to recruit fewer graduate students, medical students this past year because they just simply didn't feel confident about their ability to carry them through. And so I definitely believe that, again, stability and security are a really big driving factor for people who are leaving. And as I mentioned, perhaps things that allow them to also have the kind of life that they want to have outside of research as well. While everything is going on, I know a lot of us are also feeling like we're still being told to be just as competitive as ever as we're pursuing fewer positions, while the market is being in many ways saturated, either within the academic realm or with outside of the academic realm. And so without stable funding, opportunities are becoming harder to come by to remain within the United States. As for, or to build off of what JP said, though, because I think this is really important, feeling valued is absolutely important for our well-being. And I think for a lot of us, we expected to spend a lot of our trainee years convincing people that we knew what we were talking about, convincing people that we had really good research questions and were experts in our fields. And I think a lot of us did not anticipate having to convince people that science was important. And I think that that is jarring and blindsiding because to us, that just goes without saying. And so I think what also contributes to this brain drain is this idea that this is now a new element of what it means to be a trainee in the United States. We now have to potentially convince people that research with very clear impacts on healthcare and well-being is important. And I can understand that being exhausting and really frustrating. And when we go on to talk about mobilization efforts, I really like to encourage people, if they can, to find a way to speak out that does not drain you excessively. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. But I do think it's helpful to start thinking about moving forward. How do we communicate the importance of what we do? Because we can't assume that everybody agrees with it, assuming that they did in the first place.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So yeah, let's move into this now. How do we keep people engaged, right? I think I'll turn to JP because tell us a little bit about some of the stuff you've been doing in terms of mobilizing scientists. Why do we need to do this? And what's working? What came out of that work?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot that's been going on these past couple months. Look at my calendar, I still can't believe it's July 30th, right? But seriously. Yeah, but I mean, at the start of the year, we had this onslaught of all these different executive orders that were really impacting the science that we do and the scientific workforce. So early on, I was one of the main organizers of Stand Up for Science. And while we were organizing that, there's this whole thing of like, well, March 7th, which was the day of the rallies, is going to be just the beginning, right? March 7th was just going to be the day that we hope to ignite the scientific workforce. Can we get scientists out and start getting them to advocate, start communicating their science to their communities? I can't say that happened, but I can say that some things are coming out of it, right? So, for example, some of the organizers of Stand Up for Science, we created our own nonprofit called Science for Good. And this is where we're, again, trying to reimagine science so that we are doing it with our communities and communicating it within our communities. So we're trying to be creative, right? We're trying to pair research labs with their local breweries and trying to put research facts on beer labels so that we can try to embed science into communities in a way where it's not just us being at a brewery and talking at people, right? We do want to try to engage people and really spark their curiosities. There are other groups such as SNAP, which is the Scientist Network for Advancing Policies. If you're unfamiliar, this is a graduate student-led grassroots organization that led the McClintock Letters. So the McClintock Letters initiative was one where we got a couple hundred graduate students and we had them write op-eds to their local newspaper, kind of detailing, how they got into science and why science is so important and what is happening to science, right? This group is also organizing congressional district visit days, right? So right now we're mobilizing a bunch of different graduate students from across the country and having them visit their local representatives so that they can talk to them about the importance of scientific funding right now. There's a lot of different ways that groups are being mobilized, but I'll stop with those two examples before I move on. I want Sierra and Crystal to also speak.
Well, I appreciate that because I do want to highlight what you all are doing to help the situation and all of your efforts. So thank you for going into detail there. And then I'll go to Sarah because I know you've been involved in advocacy and maybe you can talk a little bit about that and how that's been going.
I can briefly. I want to make sure that we give Crystal time to talk about the wonderful things that she's doing as well. So I started in the advocacy sphere in 2018, communicating with congressional members about the importance of science and research funding. And I was able to do that through a professional society. And one thing that I recommend for people who want to get involved is to look at the societies that you may attend conferences for, or alternatively, that you may publish with. And look at the efforts that they are doing for mobilizing. There are often committees that you can also become engaged with in order to have a wonderful support network of like-minded people. Trainees are often eligible to enter into these spheres. So I started on my first national committee as a graduate student, and I'm continuing now as a postdoctoral fellow. This is a really accessible way for people to become engaged, particularly if you don't quite know where to start, looking at ongoing efforts, and JP already highlighted Stand Up for Science. I would also just ask at a more practical and local level, for moving forward, if you are feeling uncertainty within your environments, I think it's a really good idea to manage up and talk to people within your departments. I would certainly hope that there have been discussions by your departments, but I cannot assume that. In fact, JP and I were talking before this webinar about how labs have been very inconsistent in some are hunkering down, some are kind of pulling the reins, and others aren't. And this is just adding to everybody's uncertainty. And so I would tell you that as we're talking about speaking up within your lab, within your department, is a really good thing to do. I know that some senior personnel are very concerned about saying that they don't know what to do. And I don't think, though, as trainees, we expect that they always know what to do, and sometimes just inviting them to share that with you, and not to mention to just talk about what we can all be doing. I think that community, I guess if we're talking about another positive thing to come out of this, has been the growth in the scientific community rallying around this. And I hope that you can find that at your institutions. And I certainly hope you can find them within your societies. So I think I'll stop there on my end because I want Crystal to be able to continue this.
Yeah, those are really good ways to engage, I think, and thank you for highlighting different things that people can get involved with. And then Crystal, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing on your end as well.
Yeah, I wanted to briefly piggyback off of what Sierra just mentioned about the growth in the scientific community. I've been in a couple of circles with my colleagues, and I've been able to just hear their thoughts, bad, good, and I think that me being present and me reading about just, the both positive and negative impacts of how everything has been going, it's been very eye-opening to say the least. But as a UCR alum, I'm also still connected with um, you know, some alumni support groups. I have a petition that I seen on LinkedIn. I'm just gonna share it here. Now, signing the petition is just the first step. It's just a way for the general public as well as any students who who would be interested in getting more involved in advocacy. It's just to kind of give an overall summary of what exactly is being affected right now. There still has to be, actual community organizing that takes place after this. There's still virtual sit downs that can still occur. But I just want to share that just so folks can know what's going on with the UC system.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting. I think one thing I wanted to touch upon is, as we think about sort of wrapping this up and looking to the future, I think there's some call to action here for universities. We've heard from people saying, "Oh, I wish my university did more," or "I wish Congress did more," right? So there's, I think, a place for academics to do things and then place for government to act. I guess I'm saying Congress because not the executive branch here. So all of you all have been involved in multiple things, kind of at both of these spheres. And maybe I'll go back to Crystal. You talked about this petition. What are you kind of hoping this will achieve? If you can address both, what the institution could be doing and maybe what Congress could be doing, if you have thoughts on that.
My thoughts would definitely be more increased youth voices. And when I say youth, I don't want to age anyone, but I do believe that hearing from actual student voices being highlighted, right, I think are just number one, just very, very critical at this stage. Secondly, I really would love Congress to really hear these students out. Whether you're a postdoctoral fellow, whether you're graduating with your PhD right now, whether you're just applying for your PhD, I would really love for them to step in and yeah.
Well, I can tell you our office, we've met with multiple student groups from a lot of universities this year. We have included, some of their data, also hearing data from schools, but also opinions that have been included in some of the things we've been working on, including letters and speeches and so on. So my boss has been very outspoken against the cuts and supporting the pipeline. Obviously, we're one of many offices here, but Congress is doing something at least. At least we are trying. JP, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is just tough because today, as Sierra mentioned, is the day that my lab had the whole sit down of, oh, hey, things are happening. We might need to hunker down and do the science. But I guess my call to action to the universities is not just to highlight youth voices, but to also train them. Because I do think that is a barrier that needs to be lowered, right? I have a lot of peers who, I'll mention that I do visits to Congress. I'll set up meetings with my representatives. And the first question is always, well, I don't even know how to do that. Nobody's ever taught me how to do that. I don't even know where to start, right? So I guess a good call to action here for universities would be, hey, like your students, the people that you are, relying on to do such great work, they're not trained to do this. You can have them on your side if you just gave them the tools to actually go to Congress and talk about these things. For Congress, I would love if they stopped treating science as a partisan issue, right? I would love if they invested in predictable long-term support for all these different trainees across the country. Yeah, I don't know. I know that's very brief, and I'm sure more will come up, but I think I'll leave it at that and let Sierra cook.
That's a good start. Yeah, Sarah, what do you think?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think that a lack of talking about this is not the solution. I'm really, really encourage speaking up about the importance of your work at any level you can, whether you're talking to family members and neighbors and friends, reaching up to policymakers, finding a way to talk about this that doesn't burn you out. Of course, you need to be mindful that this is going to be a very long journey, and I think in some ways an evolution of training in science is that I think and hope in a way that there's going to be more emphasis on being able to talk about the importance of what we're doing. For those who have applied for fellowships or other grants before, you have to do this as part of your grant application, but not everybody does that. Not everybody is necessarily eligible. And so for many people, this year is the first time that they're really thinking about their work outside of the environment that they're collecting their data in. For universities, I certainly ask them to be promoting resources that allow you guys to gain skills that are important, not just for your training, but for your career projection outside of academic circles, or at least transferable skills. So I'm hoping that universities are going to be offering more that's talking about how to network. We talk so much about that, and a lot of us talk about it like it's something that it's so easy to just send a cold email or add somebody on LinkedIn, but there's so much more nuance to it. And likewise, gaining skills that can apply to a multitude of different future fields. That might be bioinformatics, that might be writing for a public audience. I think that advertising these more transferable skills is a really good thing that universities can be doing. The difference between writing a CV and a resume, I mean, things that seem small and that we're expected to learn in our own times, but these are things that I absolutely believe can be offered right now, and that trainees would really appreciate having as additional sources of support and for the recognition. Universities can't make up for all the funding cuts right now, but they can be recognizing how important our futures are and showing that they're thoughtful and caring about it.
Yeah, and to quickly add to that, right? I think this moment has sparked a lot of organizing, right? So we're seeing a lot of op-eds, we're seeing petitions, policy briefs, we're seeing the formation of grassroots coalitions from early career researchers like myself, right? And themes that I'm pulling out of this are stuff that again universities are not equipping their students with, which is how do you storytell from the perspective of a scientist? How do you create a cross-institutional coalition? I would love if universities did that, right? We're in a moment where policy groups here at UNC at least are collaborating with policy groups at Penn, at UCLA, and stuff like that. But I would love if the actual universities would form a cross-institutional coalition. And again, the whole direct engagement thing with policymakers, right? I would love if that was also part of our curricula as graduate students. So we're missing that institutional support, and we need sustained, like Crystal alluded to, sustained platforms for early career voices. So yeah, earlier I didn't have a thought out answer, but that is my answer now.
That's great. And I appreciate there's been a lot of questions submitted that we're not going to get to right now. So I'll try to address some of the ones that have been asked. We can respond afterwards too. But looking really broadly, I want to ask this sort of broad question of what do we think job prospects look like for folks who are graduating, want to stay in science? What does the future of science look like, right? I mean, I want to hear from you guys. And what is it that would need to change for America to be number one, right? And continue, if that's even possible still, for talent to be retained in science. I don't know who wants to take that one first.
I can go. So what do I want the future of science to look like? I want a system where science and society move in tandem, right? I think we all can agree that society moves incredibly fast, but I don't think science has, right? Like I would love the future of science to be one where it's not a privilege to survive a PhD, right? I would love a system where collaboration is rewarded, not punished, and where early career researchers have the freedom to ask bold questions without fearing, retaliation from anyone and anything. I would love the future of science to fund professional development because they know it matters, not just funding bench work. And I would love if the future of science rewarded civic engagement and teaching, not just papers, right? I think that would be really good, not just for us early career researchers and for the future of science, but also for that competitiveness in the global sense of things, right? I think if we buy into those values and build around these ideas, then I think our competitiveness as a country in the world will take care of itself. Cannot say competitiveness. There we go.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And maybe I'll go to Crystal next to kind of maybe you can build on this question of, retaining talent, right? And kind of what would we need to do for that? If that makes sense. And happy to also answer what JP said already.
You said to retain talent?
Yeah, so I think from your perspective of, we want to keep scientists from all backgrounds here. There are things that would help, and kind of what do you see as the future of science? So would you like that to look like?
I do agree with JP on boosting the civic engagement. It's often that I find that a lot of students, we don't really know how to strategize our way through, college. Our journeys are kind of more so dependent on academic scheduling and then getting in the class, passing the test, and then getting involved in research, but then not knowing how to really place ourselves in the midst of opportunities and getting them because we lack the strategy behind, I guess you could say, self-advocacy, right? I think the future of science and also uh, being able to be having the United States be able to keep its talent, number one would definitely be creating more, how can I say this? I don't want to say opportunity. I do want to say I guess making like building more pathways to actually having these skills under wrap, right? So professional development, as JP also mentioned. Um, but then having that incentive, that financial incentive added to it, because a lot of people are willing to do things and volunteer, but then it also encourages them to keep on pursuing professional development if there is an incentive of some kind. Um, and then also more extracurricular activities in the sense of training other parts of the brain. And really quickly, I know we're short on time, but I was able to get through college because, one of my extracurricular activities includes playing an instrument. Um, I feel as if maybe there can be more creative outlets that can be embedded in the academic curriculum, hopefully. But I'll let Sierra go ahead.
I like that idea. Thanks for your perspective of extracurricular stuff. Yeah, important. Okay, Sarah, go ahead.
I can actually build off of that, especially, we've been talking about advocacy with policymakers, but civic science isn't just communicating with politicians. And I think for a lot of people, the idea of communicating with politicians puts a bad taste in their mouth. And that's okay because people who vote also have an incredible power over the kind of things that we're talking about. And people who vote are just within your community. And so when you talk about extracurricular activities, Crystal, I also think about doing science awareness days, holding fairs. I know of events that'll happen in malls or where departments will go out to schools and provide education and awareness. And for me, this idea of outreach and advocacy going together so well is that you can engage with whatever environments really provide you with passion. So some people really enjoy getting people excited about science who are younger. And so please know that those efforts are also still really important. It normalizes science and normalizes the importance of research. And I don't want anybody to feel pressured into doing advocacy that doesn't make them feel good. I think that anything that you do to help normalize the work that we do, to help show that we are human and accessible, is actually a really good push for the cause as well. And I just wanted to build off of that since Crystal had mentioned other means of communication.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I have many more questions I can ask you, but in the interest of time, I think we'll close here because it's a good point of I want to leave people with this idea that young scientists can get involved in the change, but also not feeling burdened, right? That seems to come up a lot of how do we empower people without feeling burdened that they have to do something. And hopefully this event has given you a bit of hope. Again, the goal was to really hear from folks who are in the middle of this right now, but also doing something about it. So hopefully we can continue these conversations in the future. Just want to give kind of one last word if anybody else wants to say anything that we haven't covered or final call to action or anything else.
I'll end by saying there is no power more powerful than community, right? I think community is really what's stringing us together right now, and we need to hold on to that as long as we can. And I think that is how we're going to get through this and come out stronger. Damn, I sound like a coach. I hate that. But yes, community.
I think I'll build on that, and as sort of my last call and my last request of everyone is please support each other. We're talking about networking it and building our own careers, but we could also have the capacity to help build other people's careers, no matter how early you are within yours. And so if people do reach out to you blindly or cold email you, finding the means and the time to help support them, I think is a wonderful thing that we are capable of doing. And so that's my last call, building off of what JP said.
And then Crystal, any last words here?
I want to second Sierra's point on networking. It's such a, I believe it's like underrated. It's underrated, not only a skill, but also just a means of, you know, just getting through and navigating school, getting through and navigating careers. Um, Cold emailing, it does seem very scary at first, but you're doing it, and the worst thing to say is no. And then, you may get a bunch of no's, but then someone will say yes. And that someone might pull you in and introduce you to their greater community, and then you eventually get more than what you've asked for, right? So really, really please, anyone who is in this room who is considering networking but has been too scared to do it, please do it. And secondly, also lean on community as well.
Well, thank you all. To be honest, I'm really inspired by all of your remarks. And hopefully we've given you a bit of ideas of things you can be doing. We'll plan to continue highlighting early career voices through our work in this group and also through Section X. So get involved with us. I'm happy to get your ideas in the future. Our blog posts will be out. And then also, again, our publication and additional data from this work. So feel free to continue engaging with us, and we look forward to future events. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you all for being here and take care of yourselves.